There are clearly good movies and clearly bad movies, but sometimes we try to run around the town, you see, to find out everything in the middle, you see? This is good bad good. You can't laugh during the intro, Brian.
Sorry.
Jeez, figured I asked.
Ass dog Bailey.
Classy.
You got something against blondes?
I gotta keep this under my hat, boys.
Fat cats and hats.
M's the ones, pal. Let's catch a big score and get fat ourselves.
Boss, we're not carrying.
What?
A piece. I don't have a piece.
A piece? Say gun, Gilbert.
Okay, I don't have a gun.
That's what I count on. That's how I sleep at night.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for tuning in on today's episode of Motherless Brooklyn, which came out in 2019. 2020? 2019? 2019. And was written for the screen and directed by Edward Norton, also starring Edward Norton.
Also produced by Edward Norton.
My name is Travis.
Edited by Edward Norton, filmed by Edward Norton.
Music by Edward Norton.
My name is Travis.
Set designed by Edward Norton.
My name is Travis.
Art direction by Edward Norton.
My name is Travis.
Grip, Edward Norton.
Key grip, Edward
Okay,
Norton.
I'm done. I'm done now. I'm
Catering done by Edward Norton.
done.
My name is Travis Orozco, and I am a director and producer. With me, as always, is
Brian Ossip. I am a video editor.
and
Kylie Demai, I'm an actor and a writer.
we are here to entertain you.
Question mark?
Yeah, entertain you.
How are we doing today? You two?
So good. Sciatica is gone almost. I went to the gym today and it felt amazing.
Nice. Brian?
I'm doing fan-fucking-tastic, man. It's almost the end of the week. I'm working from home tomorrow, so I get to sleep in a little bit. Life's good, man. No complaints.
I'm assuming you're hybrid then? Like you go in a few days a week?
Yeah, so I'm mostly in office, but
Ooh.
usually once, maybe twice a week. Yeah, we can cut this part out, but so with the wedding coming up in like 2 weeks, I've been extra cautious. Even though I just had COVID, like I'm wearing a mask in the office because I can't risk getting sick. Like with my luck, I get fucking sick.
Mm-hmm.
So I had a meeting with my manager and like the big boss today, and then somebody else. We were in this like small little meeting room. I was the only one wearing a mask. 2 hours later, my boss, the big manager, runs by with a mask on. She's like, "I just tested positive. I got to go." And I'm like, "Oh, that's fucking good." I was sitting 3 feet from someone who just, and like likely, I mean, I just had it. So like, unless she has a different variant, there's no chance of me getting it. But
Right.
it got me real fucking scared. So I told my boss, I was like, I am probably not going to be in the office a whole lot in these next 2 weeks.
Yeah,
I was like, I'm
makes
probably
sense.
staying home. And he was like, fine, do what you have to do. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I'm going to as many events as possible in the next 2 weeks so that I can make your wedding a super spreader.
I'll be honest with you. I don't care what happens after the wedding. As long as we get through the weekend. If I get COVID and I'm sitting on a beach in Mexico on the honeymoon, oh no, I have to stay in Mexico for a few more days. Oh,
That
damn.
actually happened to two of my friends who got married in Belize. And then,
Oh, really?
yeah, the husband got COVID, but he felt fine, no symptoms.
Oh,
So, and they had this like gorgeous cottage on the beach. So they just stayed for another couple days. It's like,
Sounds pretty good to me.
yeah, it's like,
I mean, unless it like knocks you out and then it's like, oh, I'm on the
Well,
beach, but I feel
That's
like
true.
crap.
it's hot.
Yeah.
The sun's beating down. There's
Yeah,
sand
yeah. Like
in
the last
every
That's true.
crevice.
is the
And
beach.
yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's
How are you?
go-
How are you doing, Travis?
I'm good. I'm glad that I was finally asked.
Oh, we
No, we
asked
No
asked
one
you.
ever cares about me.
You're right.
We asked
don't.
you recently.
Just joking. yeah, I was just.
We've asked you in
I
the
was
past like
going,
4 episodes.
Maybe like 4 episodes ago.
Yeah. So don't say never.
Yeah. Never say never.
I'm doing good though. I
Yeah.
am happy and excited to be talking about Motherless Brooklyn. So, with that, let's get a plot synopsis from Google. Hey Google, what is the plot synopsis of the film Motherless Brooklyn?
Here's the synopsis of Motherless Brooklyn. Lionel Essrig is a lonely private detective who doesn't let Tourette's syndrome stand in the way of his job. Gifted with a few clues and an obsessive mind, Lionel sets out to solve the murder of Frank Minna, his mentor and only friend. Scouring the jazz clubs and slums of Brooklyn and Harlem, Esrig soon uncovers a web of secrets while contending with thugs, corruption, and the most dangerous man in the city.
Thank you, Google.
That was pretty in depth.
You're
That
welcome.
was.
I'm just doing my job.
Oh.
Yep.
You know what?
A
You
little
did it well,
delayed,
Google.
but you did it. Whatever.
Do you think she heard me call her a bitch?
Yeah, probably.
I'm very
Definitely.
insecure about this now.
Yeah, all your Google stuff, if you have any, is just going to be a little bit slower from now on.
Yeah, right. Or
Yep.
I'm going to search one thing and it's going to pop up with some totally different thing.
Yeah, your ads are going to be all
All
off
over
now
the-
in
yeah.
Chrome.
Yep.
Mhm.
So, before we jump into the different categories that we're going to explore for this film, let's get the verdict. Let's start with Kai.
Yeah, I'm ready. I think this is a bad, good film.
Okay. Brian?
I concur.
I kept going back and forth. I do think it's both of these in different parts of the film,
Of course.
but I have to pick bad, good.
Ooh,
Huzzah.
that's 2 in a row
Yeah.
that we're
Yeah.
in agreement.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
It
I'm
was
not surprised.
it was really tough for me. Not that I would want to rewatch this ever, but there was some fun to it at some points where I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, the first category we're going to be talking about is the plot / script / story. Kai.
Which is basically the plot.
Yeah. Or story structure.
Okay.
Kai, how did you feel about this?
Yeah.
Because you said you were ready.
Oh,
But now you're not ready. Come on.
No, I was ready with my bad good. How did I feel about the story? I really so the reason actually I think that for me that this is a bad good story film is because I like the story. I mean, it's Chinatown, right? But set in New York in 1957. I had to look up what exact year this was actually set in and when it was happening. This is based on a book. I imagine the book is long and thoughtful and goes into a lot of detail, but I don't actually know that. I love the idea of this film and this script and this book. I don't know if I love
By the idea of it, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. What idea of it?
Just
Is there anything in particular?
I love the topic. I love that this story was told now. I love that it opens with the quote, "Oh, it is excellent to have a giant's strength, but it is tyrannous." Is that how you say that word? Tyrannous? To be a tyrant? Tyrannous?
I
say
barely speak
tyrannous.
English.
Tyrannous? Okay, I'm going to say
Tyrannous?
tyrannous. Okay, hold on. Let me
Hey,
read
Google.
this again.
Is it tyrannous or tyrannous?
On the website vocabulary.com, they say, someone who exerts their authority in a cruel or oppressive way is tyrannous.
Tyrannous.
Do you
Tyrannous.
want a little more context?
No, thank you. Thank you so much, you sweet, sweet woman.
Okay.
I think it was
Just okay. She's still mad at you.
Yeah.
She's like, fuck you, guy. I heard what you said.
Right.
But when I said thank you, she was like, "I'm just doing my job, and I
Doing
love
my
to
job,
serve."
Yeah. Okay, let me read the quote over again. "Oh, it is excellent to have a giant's strength, but it is tyrannous to use it like a giant." That's what started this movie out. And I appreciate that quote. I appreciate the message there, especially in this time when we live in a world, but also America, which is this capitalistic, system, and a lot of people in power are
Power hungry,
power hungry.
greedy, corrupt,
Yeah, all those things.
American.
American, yeah.
Assholes.
Well, yeah. So I thought the telling of this story was very poignant for the moment that it was in. This was definitely trying to go as a contender for the Oscars when it came out.
Was it?
Yeah, he got, I can't remember, there was some nomination or award. I'm going to look it up.
No, you're lying. You're lying.
No, I'm not. I only know that because I really like Ed Norton. I always have. And I listened to Mark Maron's What the Fuck
Mhm.
podcast episode where he interviewed Ed Norton about this movie. And it was right around the time that he does all of his award interviews. So it was right around that season. I remember clocking that and I was like, I really want to see this movie. And then for some reason, I just didn't until now.
I read an article that he did an interview for, and he was talking about the film and how when he had met Bruce Willis years ago, Bruce Willis had always said, like, if you ever need me to be in a film, I will do it. And like, apparently he did it for like super, super cheap, which is really rare for Bruce Willis.
According to the IMDb trivia, take this for what it's worth, but it says, according to writer, director, and actor Edward Norton, the principal major stars all
And
worked
caterer.
for free. Yes, and caterer. The principal major stars all worked for free on this. I
Oh,
find
wow.
that
Okay.
hard to believe, but maybe heavily discounted.
Yeah. Like they took the
Interesting.
SAG minimum. They were all making like $125 a day.
So this won the Satellite Award for Best Art Direction and Production Design, and which I could see.
Yeah.
And
This is riveting podcasting.
Oh, that's it. That's what it won.
I was about to say,
Sorry.
while
I-
Kai keeps us on the edge of our seats, why don't we switch
Yeah.
to Brian on his thoughts about
Yeah, okay.
script and story and plot?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I pretty much agree with what Kai said. I liked the idea of it. I thought it got a little convoluted maybe at the end. And maybe this is just because I'm dumb, but I found it a little hard at points to like follow exactly what was happening.
You're
or
not
like
dumb,
who
Brian.
was. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it felt like once it became clear that Willem Dafoe was Alec Baldwin's brother and that we think Willem Dafoe is the father, but then Alec Baldwin's the father. It just like it got a little confusing at points. I like the idea of it. I like, just in general, I like watching movies that take place in whether it's 50s, 60s, 70s for the art direction and the set deck and stuff like that. Like I was talking about before we started rolling, this has nothing to do with the storyline, but I just fucking loved the car that Edward Norton was driving throughout most of the movie. And I like watching movies that take place in old times because of that. But I thought the idea of the story was interesting. The idea of having like the hero of the story not being like a superhero or, you know, like the perfect human being, I feel like is normally when you watch a movie, I feel like a lot of times it's somebody who's, you know, it's very clear that that person is incredible at everything. And of course they're going to be a great detective, but having Edward Norton's character, well, I forget what his name was, even though you just said it like 2 minutes ago.
Lionel.
I thought
Lionel.
Yeah. I liked that. I thought that felt different, I guess.
Yeah. Going off of what you had said, Kai, about this being a book, I did look it up, and apparently the book takes place in the 90s. So like it was Edward Norton's decision
Yeah.
to like place it in the 50s. And then when asked why, he said he's just always wanted to do a period piece.
Well, didn't he say something about like, yeah, he also wanted to do like a noir style movie too?
And it's like, it's those comments that like, and this is kind of responding to your like, I love Edward Norton. I very much like Edward Norton, but I do think he takes himself so seriously. I mean, from the stories that we hear, you know, the
Right.
stories that happen with like American History X and like what happened with the Hulk. And one of my favorite performances by him is in Birdman when he's playing like literally himself.
Love that
Like-
movie and everything about it, including his
Yeah.
performance in it.
Yeah. I guess I kept trying to figure out what the need of it being in the 50s was. Like, did the story actually need to be in the 50s?
No.
And I don't think it.
No, I actually think it would have been more powerful had it been in the 90s
Mhm.
because it's much closer to us now. And this kind of stuff is happening in the now.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, you could make the argument that him as a character with Tourette's is more powerful in the 50s when he even says at one point, he's like, I don't know what it's called. He just keeps saying like, there's something broken in my brain. Like
Yeah, there's glass in my head.
nowadays or in the 90s, I'm assuming that, because I had a friend growing up that had Tourette's, and I'm assuming even in the 90s, well, I guess it had to have been because we went to high school. We started high school in the 90s. So like people knew what Tourette's was. It wasn't as much of people weren't thinking, oh, look at this freak show, like they kept calling his character.
Yeah.
You know, so like that part I think is a little bit more powerful being set in the 50s because it's a little bit more of an unknown thing that he's dealing with.
Mhm. I
But is it
agree.
necessary? No.
I agree. but I also didn't think they actually hit that chord hard enough. Like, I just felt like there were so many times where his Tourette's was acting up and no one was like really responding to like the things he was saying. And especially back then when it wasn't very common, but he's like yelling like big tit sugar titties. And I'm like, no one is like getting offended by this?
Right. Yeah.
Or like
especially at that time.
especially
right?
at that time when you're like,
things
who
are
is it? Especially
so-
like in Harlem where it's like,
Yeah.
who is this crazy white guy?
Yeah.
And I'm saying
feel like
crazy
there
as in
were-
like that's their interpretation. I'm not saying that anyone that
We
has
understood.
the mental
Yes.
handicap is crazy. But yeah, that perception would be like, who is this crazy guy yelling at everyone?
Right.
I feel like there were a lot of
That, but then also I clocked how many times in the script they had to say, like a character standing next to him who is a friend of his, or he himself, Lionel's character, had to say, sorry, I've just got this thing with my head.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Like how many times? And I understand, right? Because in the reality of it, that's
Mhm.
what you're going to have to do because this is it's
Yeah.
a strange thing to have happen in
Yeah.
front of people. People don't understand how to handle it.
I was gonna say I
So-
feel. Oh, sorry.
No, go.
Go, Brian.
Say,
So
to
I
your
was-
point, I hate you both. To your point, Travis, I felt like there were a decent amount of times where other characters were taken aback by either his twitching or the vocal outbursts. To your point about how like people you didn't think they hit the point hard enough about
How much of a struggle that
people-
would have been back then.
Yeah, I felt like there were a lot of times where characters were taken aback or looking at him weird or telling him to knock it off as if he's able to or something. I felt like I actually would disagree with you and say that I thought they did a decent job of nailing that point or hitting that point.
Kai, you're the tiebreaker. What do you think? About the
I
representation.
noticed both, right? I noticed how many times it was said by, like I said, by Lionel's character or somebody close to him when around other people who didn't know about his disease. But I also clocked a couple times where I went, that stranger is being rather nice about the fact that he just said big tits or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But I did
Big
appreciate
titty sugar.
yeah, I did appreciate though how many times in the movie people said "God bless you" when
Oh,
he would
yeah.
say what
Yeah.
what would he keep
He
saying?
like
If-
Yeah.
knew it was coming, like when he was gonna say something,
Right,
so he would like
cover
do it
himself.
into his.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that was a clever and sort of fun way
Yeah.
of dealing with that.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say I was bothered by what
Yeah.
you were bothered by,
Yeah,
Travis.
and me repeatedly saying the big tit sugar line is not making fun of the. I just want to make sure that that's very clear.
You just
Yeah.
want to say big tits as many as you can, as
No,
many times as
it's
you
more
can on the
so,
podcast.
more so commentary on that scripted line versus any
We
handicap.
understand.
I just want to make sure.
Yes, it's good.
And also, while I was watching it, I was thoroughly confused, and it just shows my ignorance towards Tourette's. But I was like, oh, is he also? Does he also have OCD? Is he also autistic?
Well, they never say it's Tourette's, right? He just keeps saying that there's something wrong with my
Yeah.
brain. And
Yeah.
I tend to believe that mental illness is less white and black than maybe a physical injury, right?
Mhm.
If you
Yeah.
break your leg, you know that you broke your leg. It's really hard to tell with mental illness. So you can diagnose something as, say, Tourette's, and that's sort of the gist of it.
Mhm.
But who knows what's going on with your brain, and it can span in a lot of different ways, especially if whatever the ailment is or the disease is has to do with trauma or has to do with major stress. Then you can definitely have some type of OCD going along with it, or mania going along with it, or depression going along with it. I mean, I think mental illness is hard to just like pinpoint as one thing.
Yeah, of course. And to add a few facts to that,
Yes.
But not that was. I mean, yes, agree.
yes.
But I was gonna say it forced me to actually research
Tourette's.
and come to find out that a lot of those things, like the OCD tendencies, the more autistic leaning tendencies, those are common with Tourette's. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I found out that, so at first I was really thrown off by it. And like, this is also speaking from, like I said, the ignorance of not really knowing anyone with Tourette's, or like having ever been around someone with Tourette's for an extended period of time. But Edward Norton actually consulted the Tourette's Association of America, and they actually gave the sign of like the seal of approval on this film and the representation of Tourette's in this film. Which I was like, oh, that's awesome. That's awesome that he like did his due diligence and like really wanted to represent that community well.
I read that too, and that made me feel better because one of the first notes I wrote was that it felt a little awkward watching someone play someone with Tourette's.
Yeah.
So we can get into this, I guess, more with the acting and stuff too, but when I read that, it made me feel a little bit better about it, knowing he had consulted that association and they had signed off with their seal of approval. Made me feel a little less uncomfortable about it.
You had felt uncomfortable in that, like, they should have casted someone with Tourette's, or?
Yeah, I don't know. It felt weird watching someone who doesn't have Tourette's play someone with Tourette's.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't really know exactly why. It felt a little uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just very sensitive, Travis.
He's a very sensitive guy.
Very sensitive.
I mean, I had that moment too in the beginning, and I kept wanting to quote the movie whose name I can't think of right now.
Tropic Thunder.
Tropic Thunder, yeah. I won't say that quote here, but that's
You never go
full.
You just never go full.
Yes.
R word.
Yes.
Yeah.
Derogatory term. Yes.
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 Yeah, which made me giggle in the beginning, but I don't know where I was going.
The number one, like the first user review, I know the segue you're about to do, but I wanted to say this. The first user review on IMDb, the title of the review is literally Edward Norton Goes Fool.
Oh, wow.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to say that my first note that I wrote down was always love a good Ed Norton VO. Because I feel like in so many of his movies, he's doing the voiceover, and I just love his voice, so I like to listen to it. But that was in the script, right? So I actually liked the fact...
I don't know. I think a lot of the times he needs VO because he gets into the edit bay, and then he's like, oh, crap, none of this makes sense. I need to now explain everything.
Hey, maybe. But I actually appreciated the VO in this script. In a script like this, right? Because this is a film noir sort of a thing.
In the 1950s, crime thriller.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that I liked that. I also wanted to point out, I started to... About 45 minutes in, I felt like I knew what was going on in the film. And
Kai's smarter than us.
That tracks.
No, I didn't know everything, but Bobby Cannavale.
Cannavale, yeah.
I love him.
Yeah, who I absolutely love.
Yeah.
He
my mom is obsessed with him.
Yeah, he's wonderful on stage and in films.
I actually saw him on stage in New York on Broadway.
What did you see? Motherfucker with a hat?
No, he
I saw that.
He was in that film? I mean, he was in that
play, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my
favorite
favorite playwrights of all time.
Yes.
Not that play, but the playwright is one of my favorite playwrights of all time. Stephen Alge Gurgis.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite play of all time, contemporary, is Jesus Hopped the A Train, and
such a great play.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Such a great play.
I own all his plays.
Wait, what did you see Bobby Cannavale in?
He was on Broadway in a play with Daniel Radcliffe where they're both, I'm blanking on, it's like So It Happened or As It Happened or something along those lines. But essentially they're two reporters. One is the older jaded one and one is the more young idealistic one. Clearly, you probably know who played what.
Bobby
Cannavale was definitely the younger one.
Yeah, I know. We were both trying to make that joke. It wouldn't come
they're
out of my
both
mouth
covering.
fast enough.
They're both covering a suicide in Las Vegas, and they're having a debate about how they should cover that story and whatnot. Sorry, I digress though.
Yep.
I do feel like we haven't really talked about the story at all.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Well,
and
so
what
then
has
can
happened.
I finish my point?
Yeah, of course. Go for it.
Yeah, no,
Okay, so the story structure.
All day long. So the whole piece.
Don't sing any more than that. We don't have the copyrights. We can't afford that.
Well, I said day, and the actual lyrics are night,
Oh, that's
so
true.
I think
It's all
we're okay.
nightly, yeah. That's true.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, go.
So the whole bit with Bobby Cannavale that I feel like I'm saying his name wrong every time I say it. Cannavale? Cannavale. Bobby
I
Cannavale.
say Cannavale, I
Cannavale?
think, but
Kinda
I don't
cuckoo.
know.
I think I throw an R in
Yeah.
there and I say Carnival.
Bobby Cannavale. So I'm just going to call him good old Bob.
But we all know that we love him. So
Bobby, what is his freaking name in the movie? This is too long
Tony.
of a diatribe. Tony. He's
Tommy.
always a Tony. Oh,
Tyler? No, it's Tony.
Turk.
It's Tony.
Great. So Tony.
Cannavale.
this whole bit is just ridiculous. So Bobby Cannavale, his character, I knew from like the very beginning, but I especially clocked it like 45 minutes in. I'm going, I thought he was behind it, right? That he the whole time knew what was going on. He was working behind Boss Man. That he and his wife possibly plotted to get him killed. Clearly Frank, yeah.
Bruce Willis' character.
Clearly that wasn't the case, but it was like, that was so obvious to me from the jump of the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to know if you guys felt the same way.
They don't really try to hide that very well.
No, it was so
Yeah.
obvious. And I wish that it had been a little more hidden, or that it hadn't actually ended up that way.
Yeah.
Because it was so right out in front of you that it made me wonder how Edward Norton's character didn't catch it.
Yeah.
Like it was
I mean,
that out in front of you.
it was probably he was probably too close to the situation.
I mean,
Yeah, and when
I
you think,
understand
like-
that that's what it was supposed to be, but I
Yeah.
thought it was too obvious. that-
Yeah. Like I felt like he was involved, and it felt very early on like him and Leslie Mann's character were definitely shagging behind Bruce Willis's
yeah.
back. Yeah.
I completely forgot she was in this film.
Yeah, we'll get to her later.
Yeah. I did not pick. I didn't think about. So the beginning of this film, I was very much like, this is a good bad movie. Yeah, because the first 45 minutes, I did not believe anyone. I thought it felt like everyone was just like in costume running around on like community theater stages. Like it felt very much like that. And I honestly didn't care a whole lot about anything that was happening. So I wasn't like tracking or like trying to think about characters like motivations or anything like that. And I want to say like around the 45-minute mark, that's when the twists start to like unravel. And that's when I'm like, oh, this could be so much more. This is now bad, good movie. Yeah, bad, good movie.
Yeah, I wrote down 45 minutes in is where I start to know who's behind it, which was Tony, or so I thought at that moment. And
Did
then
you
I
happen to
said,
write
but
down
then
what
I
that was?
liked that they take us in another direction by following us. That's when he goes to the city council meeting for the first time and steals the press ticket out of the guy's hat. And it's the first time we meet Willem Dafoe. And so like right away it leads us to believe one thing, Tony, and then about 45 minutes in it switches and we meet Willem Dafoe, who's the actual person for the first time. So I did actually appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to point out that in that first scene when he buys him dinner, he says, "Can I buy you a drink around the corner?" And Willem Dafoe's character is like, "No, but I'm hungry. You can buy me dinner." And then he orders cheesecake and he asks for it to be warmed up. Warm cheesecake. Has
Yeah, that's
anyone
weird.
ever
I didn't
heard
catch
of
that.
You didn't catch that? That was like, it stuck out to me so hard because I was like, cheesecake?
It was
warm?
Yeah, I didn't catch that either, but the idea of that is just not appealing.
Gross.
And I love cheesecake,
Who
So do
wants a
I.
but
cheesecake?
not heated up.
Is that like an olden 1950s thing?
No, I think-
Because also the waiter or waitress didn't turn around and go, cheesecake? Warm?
none of the service industry people in this film like seemed like real people.
Yes,
at
but
all.
see, Lionel should have stopped right then and gone, warm cheesecake? This man is a psychopath and I need to exit because I will learn no new information from him.
Yeah, I imagine
it
it's
was-
just
Sorry,
a
go.
way of showing his like eccentricity.
No,
I would think.
It was
But
Willem
yeah,
Dafoe's
but I'm not
character?
disagreeing. It was that's disgusting.
Yeah, it was Willem Dafoe's character who orders it.
Maybe also why I started to really care about this film at the 45-minute mark is because Willem Dafoe comes into it, and I'm like, we'll get to this in acting, but I thought he was the highlight of this whole
Willem
film.
Dafoe and Cherry Jones comes into it as well, even though she's not in it too much.
Yeah, I wanted more of her actually, but
me too.
Okay, so I still feel like we haven't really gone.
We really
into,
haven't touched on the story.
Yeah, we haven't touched on the story and how it unravels, and I think it's going to take all three of us to or at least maybe just
you. You're on your own.
Because I had a hard time. I'm like
cheesecake.
Brian. I had a hard time tracking like what was going on for a lot of it, and Kai knew exactly what was going on. So go for it, Kai.
I didn't know exactly what was going on,
So
but
Frank is
I very
murdered.
much followed the Tony character. But yeah, Frank is murdered.
Who's played by Bruce Willis.
Right, and Frank is the boss man, higher up of Lionel and this crew of guys. What I didn't understand was what they actually do for a living. I did understand that he makes dirty deals with a lot of people,
I think
and
they're just
Well,
PIs,
I think
right?
kind of like
they're
a
PIs.
scam man. Okay,
They're a PI company,
Firm, yeah.
agency or whatever.
got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so. All right, so they work for
You're doing great, Kai. Keep going.
Yeah, great. And Frank gets killed like in the beginning.
Yeah, in the first 15 minutes.
In the first 15
and that's
minutes.
essentially the inciting incident. The rest of
Right.
the film, we're trying to figure out like
Who done it? Right.
Yeah.
This is very much a who done
And
it
why?
movie.
Yeah.
And the reason that Edward Norton's character is the one to investigate this is because he always looked up to Frank. Frank was his hero. Frank took him under his wing because Lionel, Ed Norton's character, grew up motherless in Brooklyn, hence the
Yeah.
title of the movie.
his nickname was Motherless Brooklyn.
Yes, right, which is what Frank called him. Anyway, so we get that there's a rich history here, so he wants to avenge this guy's death, or at least find out who done it. So he goes on sort of this wild goose chase and starts to figure out all this information. Part of the information, or like the clues that he has to start with, are from this meeting that he was listening in on at the beginning of the movie before Frank gets killed. And that leads him into Harlem, into these jazz clubs, and into the political.
Okay, do we know why? in Harlem?
Yeah,
I was trying to figure out that.
because that's
because
that's where the communities or the buildings and the townhomes that Alec Baldwin's character was essentially trying to knock down.
Agreed. But what takes him to Harlem in the first place? It was like 40 minutes in that I'm like, why is he in Harlem?
he finds the matches that it was part of what was pulled out of Frank's coat or hat.
And he somehow knew about the woman Laura, or like he knew there was a woman that he figured out was that character Laura. I forget exactly.
Also, the last thing that Frank whispered to him on his deathbed was Formosa. And then when he talks to Willem Dafoe, he realizes, or he talks to, my God, we're on a whoddunit to figure out the script of this movie, the plot of this movie right now.
This, in my opinion, was part of the problem with the film. I like you say the matches. I feel like it was like so it's so quick with like each thing, and I'm usually a big advocate for not thinking that your audience is dumb and actually thinking that your audience can track a story. But this one just had so many little things going on that weren't spent enough time on.
I didn't feel like that. I felt like I pretty much followed it all the way through. I'm having a hard time regurgitating all of that information because I've had like a full 48 hours of day and things happening since I actually watched this movie.
I mean, it's also a lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot.
Right. It is a lot. But I didn't get to the end of the movie feeling like I didn't understand how he got to the end of the movie. Right?
Did you, Brian?
No, only because there was a point where I kind of like thought through everything and kind of in my head figured out what was going on. But there was a good chunk in like the middle, late part where I remember thinking to myself, they kind of lost me a little bit.
I had the moment where like in the latter half, you end up like he goes down this rabbit hole and he finds out that Alec Baldwin, who is the character Moses Randolph, who is the president, I believe, of the Borough Authority, which is this made up branch of government. I was meaning to actually check if that was a real thing or not, or if it was just a fictional thing
It might have been
in the
70
movie.
years ago.
But yeah, it's essentially they make up this extra branch of government in this story at least. Kai is currently fact checking that, but he ends up having like an illegitimate child, I guess,
Yes.
with a server at a no, actually that's putting it nicely. He rapes a
he
server
rapes.
in a hotel. And the latter half of the film, when he's uncovering that and like who Laura, who's the child, not the child, but Moses Randolph's daughter, I was tracking that. I was like, why is this related to Frank? And then that one guy that just shows up randomly and then like is about to kill him on the roof. Is that? And this is me like legitimately not knowing. Was that guy?
You mean the
Moses's?
gigantic, huge guy?
No, well. I got that.
Oh, you mean Fisher Stevens' character, the guy with no neck or the skinny neck?
Yes, Lou. His name.
Yeah, Fisher Stevens.
The character name was Lou. I get that he was in the room with Frank in the beginning, but I guess was that Moses's like right hand man or something.
Yeah, that was the guy like making the deal essentially, or
okay. And what was the deal?
Sorry, I shouldn't say making the deal. That was the guy shaking him down.
Shaking who down?
Frank.
Frank in the beginning.
In the beginning.
Yeah. I get that he was in the room. I guess I just am having a hard time connecting Lou to...
Yeah, that was Lou and William Lieberman.
Moses.
Moses.
Shout out Moses.
Yeah.
I think he essentially worked for him. Or like he was his guy that he would send out to like take care of that kind of business. So Moses didn't have to, I think.
Did you get that?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't... Yeah, I got that.
Okay.
I mean, those things were, generalized. I get that you wanted it to be a more succinct, clear understanding of who everyone was. There were a lot of characters in this movie, but I didn't feel bothered by the fact that I didn't actually know this man's job and how exactly he was connected to Moses.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to know what his yearly salary was, where he lived in the city.
That's the sense that I'm getting.
Did he get a 401k?
What are the benefits of this job?
In 1957, what is...
Yeah,
salary.
Is Moses matching his 401k contributions?
Correct.
Like, I want to know
And like
those
when
things.
he offers Lionel a job later, is it going to be the same type of pay?
No.
Did he have benefits? Dental? Vision?
I think my big issue, and I'm not saying that I can't track a complex story.
But you can't track a complex story.
Or that I can't track a complex, like, number of characters. I just think that this story didn't do a good job of making me care about anything. So a lot of the time I'm like...
You're spacing out.
Yeah. Like half the time I'm just like, sure.
I get that. I specifically was like, this is a 2.5-hour movie and we're doing a podcast on it. And I often sit in this chair feeling like this when we're talking about things. That's my dumb noise.
Okay.
I feel dumb.
Got it.
And yeah.
Whoa, what happened there?
I just lost it. I just went dumb again. So I really prepared myself and I was like, I'm going to sit here. We have a 2.5-hour movie and I have to pay attention so I know what the hell I'm talking about when we sit down in this room to do this podcast. So for the first like hour, 10 minutes, I was really like pausing it every couple minutes, writing notes, figuring out what was going on, seeing what I felt about things. And then at about hour 10, I was like, I don't really care anymore. And I don't really know if I would have cared even earlier than that, except for the purposes of this podcast. I was forcing myself to like stay in it.
Yeah, I would agree.
But hour 10, I like went into my room and started cleaning my room and put it on my laptop so that, if I start doing stuff while I'm watching something, then I know it's not keeping me interested.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to say, like, around that same time, I paused it for some reason, and I remember looking at the bar, and I had like an hour and 20 minutes left or something like that, and I'd already felt like I had been watching for 2 hours, so I kind of felt the same way, like, it lost me a little bit. I didn't care as much, and like you went and did laundry, I found myself on Instagram, like, a whole bunch of times, which is not a good sign usually.
Right.
Well, I found myself looking up things about the film like how it was being made and all that. And I'm like, this is so much more interesting than what's going on right now. I'm like, what do you mean he adapted it for the 50s? Oh,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I didn't think it was bad. I just felt there was something missing. I'm not exactly sure what. Like I said before, I liked the idea of it. It just got to a point where it felt a little convoluted, and I ended up getting the pieces back together later, but there was definitely a section in the middle where it lost me because I felt lost in the storyline for a little bit.
Yeah. I also personally think they didn't do a good job of making Edward Norton's character, I should say the character name,
Lionel.
Lucius?
Lionel.
Lucifer? Making Lionel charismatic enough. And I feel like it's mainly because he's always playing catch up. Thus, like the viewers playing catch up. So like a lot of the time, like so much of this film is dedicated to unraveling this mystery that I just felt like, I just didn't care
You
whether
weren't
Lionel
absorbed
succeeded or
into
not.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I would disagree with that. I found myself intrigued by him. I found almost sort of like an underdog story in a way where everybody keeps calling him Freak Show. Nobody really gives him any respect or any credit, but he's actually got like a pretty good brain for these things, like the ability to remember all these different details and put the pieces together. I actually found his character to be pretty interesting.
I actually am going to agree with Brian on this. In the writing,
Yes,
I agree. When we get to the acting section, I may feel differently about that because
foreshadowing.
I agree with both of you. Essentially, I also didn't really care, but I don't necessarily think that's in the writing. I think on the script, it was there. I also sort of questioned how I felt about the love story because I wasn't like fully invested in that either. But I felt
forced.
like it was maybe on the script and the chemistry just wasn't there.
That whole thing just felt forced to
The
me,
whole
the
love story felt forced.
It did feel forced. But do we
And-
think that was on the
Yeah.
page forced?
But
Both.
I also think like that dynamic back then also would have raised a lot
and
more
they-
eyebrows.
Yes, and they just brushed over that.
Like maybe in the
nothing.
90s where this book was set, like Tourette's and also interracial couples.
Right.
Like
Especially
in New York
both
City.
things.
Yeah.
But much more
Yeah, in the
common
f-
and
in the
seen than
50s.
1957.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Like both
Agreed.
ways too, like on both sides. Like they would have been like, what are you doing with that white boy? And then also
Right.
it would be
Agreed.
like, what are you doing with
Yes,
that colored girl?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
I don't know where I was going with that, but any final thoughts on script or plot or story
I liked where it ended. I liked the
in front of a green screen?
No, I just mean how the story ended.
He got a house. How did he get that?
That's Frank's house.
It's
It was
Frank's
Yeah,
house.
because Frank
That's right.
left him the deed for it. Yeah.
Right.
Oh,
But
that reminded me. Sorry. One thing that reminded me. Why didn't they just kill Lionel? Why didn't they just
Lionel.
kill Lionel?
Yeah,
I
had
feel
that
like the
thought,
only
too.
person that cared about him was Frank. And when that one person, especially like in, at least according to like, mob movies or like, things of this nature in cinematic history, it's like when that one person that protects you and cares about you is gone, like no one should have,
dead.
no one should have an issue like offing this one person, especially in the 1950s with this like person who's dealing with a mental handicap. It would have just been like,
yeah.
he's
Yeah,
digging
that's
around.
true.
Like they let him dig around. Like they let him go so many times.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm like, no, they would have just shot him and thrown him in the East River.
I think that you're very
Yeah.
correct on that. Right. As they did
Also
Frank,
because no one cared about
as
him.
they
He
did-
talked about like no one. He has no family or whatever.
Right.
These people would have been like, no one does care.
Well,
about
they do make the point of they actually, for lack of like a better term, but Alec Baldwin's goons, right, his like henchmen, they actually say at some point when they bring Edward Norton to his office or Lionel to the office, they say, we had the wrong mark on you, or we didn't think you were going to be his like golden boy, something along those lines,
Yeah.
right? Because Alec Baldwin's character recognizes that this guy has gotten so far in figuring out this case that he does have a smart mind. So I think they were trying to make us feel like that's why he's been kept around. I totally get
because
though,
they thought he was stupid.
no, because they thought he was smart.
But
They thought he
wasn't
could be
smart in their eyes.
beneficial What?
But he wasn't smart in the
No,
rest?
he was. He was always smart.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
And they saw that.
Alec Baldwin's character saw that. His like henchmen or like right-hand men that come to pick him up and take him to Alec Baldwin, they make some comment about like, we didn't figure you for this. We thought our job was going to be to off you, basically, is what they're implying. However, we're
You're
taking
smart.
you to see the boss, and we're not quite sure why. Then Alec Baldwin's character, whose name I should look up, and
Moses.
Moses, thank you. And Lionel have this conversation, and he basically offers him a job. So I think they're keeping it that like this guy hasn't been killed because Moses sees a use for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even to the last conversation he has with Moses, right? But I don't know why Moses wouldn't just kill him then.
Yeah.
Once he's realized this guy isn't going to work for me.
Or the guys in Harlem. I feel like they would have beat him and like beat him to a pulp.
Yeah. Well, speaking of beating him to the pulp, he had like no scrapes or bruises or anything.
I thought.
Ugh.
He heals quick.
Yeah.
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 Just whatever Michael Kenneth
got whatever
Williams'
Wolverine
character gave him to smoke that night had something magical in it.
Yeah, adamantium.
Sorry, Kai.
Here's a question that I have about the whole story.
What happened?
What was the point of what was the point of Leslie Mann's character? I feel like she wasn't necessary.
They realized they didn't have enough women in the movie. No, I don't feel like she was necessary. I think her role was to just give us a little nod to the fact that Tony may be sleeping with her. So Tony may be a guy to not trust.
Wait, I'm confused about that. Why do y'all think that Tony and her were sleeping together? I'm assuming I missed something.
It just had a vibe, man.
I thought they also said something along those lines at one point.
No, he just she's
I thought Edward
like,
Norton asked him how long he'd been sleeping with her.
Oh.
I could be making that
I
up.
thought there was a sex scene where they're in bed together.
No,
I must have fallen asleep during that part.
During that part, yeah. No, it's just that moment when they're in the office and she puts Tony in charge of operations or whatever, and then she's like, "Why don't you come over tonight and we'll talk about it?" Something along those lines. And there's just an indication there that like, oh, they've maybe done this a time or two before.
I was so let down with that because I thought I'm like, oh, she's gonna step in and be like boss now
lady,
and like be a main character in this whole thing, and then like we don't ever see her again. I don't think. I think that's the last
but
scene
I'm
with her.
also not sad about that.
Agreed.
No, yeah, I mean, but I'm more so talking from like a character standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like I could make the argument that, like to your point, Kai, about she was there just to give the hint that Bobby Cannavale's character was maybe kind of not on the up and up. I could make the argument that it's better not having found out that information as early as we did, because like you said, like we basically knew 20 minutes into the movie that this dude was probably shady. And I wish it wasn't, like we were saying before, I wish it wasn't that obvious. And so like without Leslie Mann's character, you lose some of that potential shadiness, which I think is a good thing in this case.
Shadiness. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And just the idea that this guy, whatever he says later on in the movie when he's talking to Lionel about, I cared about Frank too, like, sure, give me the information that you're getting.
Mm-hmm.
We go, did you care about Frank? I think you maybe were sleeping with Frank's wife, in which case you didn't care about Frank. So then the information you're trying to get him to give you, you're going to use for some other benefit. So her being in there set all of that up, I believe.
I guess.
But you can set that up in a million ways. I don't think that was a necessity.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. Well, moving on to the next category, which is acting. Brian, do you want to kick this off with Leslie Mann critique?
Yeah, I thought she was terrible. So let me backtrack. I am generally a fan of hers, but I also can't think of anything not comedy that I've seen her in. And I think it was hard for me to see her in a more serious type of role. And I just didn't find her believable at all in any of her scenes. I thought she was by far the weakest out of the entire cast.
Kai, thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I really like Leslie Mann most of the time, or like always, right? But I've only ever seen her do comedic work. And part of the thing that I love about Leslie Mann is that she's always sort of smiling. there's like a bit of a wink or
It's
a
true,
nod
yeah.
to the audience
Yeah.
always. And there's a bunch of SNL actors that have like done really well in comedy who have that. There's something funny just to watch because they somehow stay grounded and in it, even though they're sort of winking and nodding at you. And I think Leslie Mann is that person in comedy, and that's part of the reason I just love watching her, because I feel like I'm going on this ridiculous ride with her, and she knows we're going on it, and she's like, "Here, I'm gonna take you." Like that's what her expressions give me, all of it.
Mhm.
But that came out in this too. Like I still saw
Yeah.
the slight smile in this, and it ruined this performance for me because
Yeah.
it needs to be grounded and meaty, and there was no sense to me that like her husband just died.
Yeah.
When Lionel's character comes to the door, even though we hear she's been told once already on the phone, but she's perfectly done up.
Yeah.
Not that you would cry right away. People deal with death and with grief in all sorts of different ways. But I also didn't even see shock, right? Where she is clearly not dealing with it. I didn't,
Yeah.
there was no feeling about it. Words just seemed to be coming out. It just wasn't my favorite performance of
Do you
hers.
feel like that lack of emotion in that scene though made you?
Part of that, I think, is on purpose.
Yeah, like was it a misdirect to, or not even a misdirect? Was it a like, I'm sleeping with Tony? You know what I mean? Like a
Yeah, but I don't care even if you decide to have an extramarital affair. You did marry this person, right? You spent years of your life with this person. So even if you really have gotten to the point where you're like, fuck this person, and I'm a woman in 1957, so it's hard for me to get a divorce and to deal with all of that, and maybe I want Frank's money or Frank's whatever, so I'm just gonna, there's a bunch of story under that, right? There's a bunch of stuff going on that this person just died. So maybe it's fucking relief. Great. But and some of her words, she's saying that, but I didn't feel relief from her. I didn't feel much of anything. I heard the lines.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what was going on underneath the lines for me in that scene. And then the following scene when she, has her outburst at the office. I didn't quite believe that outburst either. Or it felt comedic to me.
Yeah.
Like it made me want to laugh. How about you? With Leslie Mann, Travis.
I agree, but I also didn't think any of the acting was remarkable other than Willem Dafoe.
Willem Dafoe.
Funny, Willem Dafoe. So Willem Dafoe and Edward Norton are like two of my favorite actors of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I actually thought Edward Norton was pretty good once I got past some of like the feeling uncomfortable about him playing a character with Tourette's. I actually thought he was pretty good, and I found him to be pretty believable for the most part. And like I said, I love Willem Dafoe, but I didn't necessarily love him in this, or at least not all of his scenes. Some of them felt a little bit, to me, I think I wrote down that it felt a little bit like overacting in some of them. Like some of the eccentric, maybe a little
Interesting.
unhinged or whatever you want to say about him, felt a little bit overacted at times, I thought.
I felt like his performance, I loved his performance. I actually thought he was the best in the movie. Well, besides Michael Kenneth Williams, I also thought he was phenomenal. And Cherry Jones, with the little that she was in it, was really good. Rest in peace, Michael Kenneth Williams. I want to say this might have been the last film. No,
I
he-
looked
no, he-
earlier.
yeah,
he did
yeah.
4 or 5 other things.
yeah, after this, yeah.
I actually think that I didn't think he was great because like I didn't think the character like had much to do.
I would agree with that.
Wait, Michael Kenneth Williams?
Yeah.
Yeah, but even with,
Yes, he played the trumpet well.
But
he hit the guy.
but that conversation that he has with Lionel about his head and
Yeah, that scene was good.
that was a great scene. That was one of my favorite scenes of the movie because it was the first time I felt like somebody actually looked at Edward Norton's character, related to him, said something about it, and it felt like it was coming from an honest place. Whereas like the character Laura, played by Gugu, and I can't say her last name or I'm gonna butcher it, Mbatha,
Mbatha, I think.
Mbatha? There's an R.
Is there an R in there
Yeah,
too? Oh,
Mbatha.
Mbatha then.
I think. Even like her giggling at Edward Norton the whole time. There was something sweet natured about that I didn't dislike, but she's our intimate connection to him in this story. Yet I felt more of an intimate connection between him and Michael Kenneth Williams in that scene that he was in than I did the whole time with the love story, just because of his commitment to that character. And I also felt like Willem Dafoe was committed to that character, but I felt like his performance did not match the maybe tone that the rest of the cast's performances were going for.
Yeah, no,
Does that
it
make
felt very
sense?
much
Yeah.
what you had brought up in our episode with The Rental and Alison Brie. It felt very much like Willem Dafoe was like, I am crafting this character. It is grounded. It is like a well lived in character, but I'm not changing it depending on who's in the scene with me.
See,
That's how-
I didn't feel like that. I felt all the first things of what you said, but I still felt like he allows his scene partner to change him.
Okay.
But you did not feel that way.
But bringing up the character of Laura, played by, did we say it was Gugu?
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought she was phenomenal too,
Yeah, I thought she was good.
but I wish her character just had more to do than play the damsel in distress, because that's
distress.
essentially what.
Yeah.
And I also just didn't believe the chemistry between her and Edward Norton.
I mean that.
The whole scene where they're in the jazz club and they start dancing felt so unbelievable and out of place to me. Like, that just didn't feel real. I didn't buy that scene.
Agreed, same. But that scene also had a bunch of tension for me because I was waiting for someone to like
Beat the shit
Beat
out
the
of
shit out of him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Which ends up happening.
yeah. But it's for wait. Why did they beat him up? No, really. Why did they beat him up?
I actually don't remember.
He says the owner of the club, played by
Oh, wait. Like something happens, right?
Well-
They find
Robert
out something
Wisdom.
about
No,
him.
they think that he's someone else. The owner of the club thinks he's someone else, or he says something about like, I don't know. I was a
Well,
little
yeah, because
confused at
someone
that part.
goes.
I think they realized that he worked for Bruce Willis's character, for
Frank.
Frank, didn't they? And that's why they beat him, because they thought he was like trying to squeeze him
I
for
thought it was
something.
because
No,
they found out
but-
he was a reporter,
Yeah,
and they didn't want the reporter there.
We don't know exactly.
I don't know, but he gets thrown out in the back alley and gets the shit kicked out of him.
And then has no scrapes the next day.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to shout out, I appreciated that Dallas Roberts was in this movie. I just like him. There's something I really enjoy about watching him act. And he most of what I've seen him in is comedic.
Who is that?
He
I don't know his acting name, and I don't know his character name.
Oh, he played one of the other PIs that worked in the office.
Oh, yes.
The sort of sweet-natured one.
Oh, yeah.
He's
yeah.
the one. He's actually the one that tells
He's a
Lionel's
little-
character about Formosa.
The one who also gets
I
beat
feel like
up
he was
too.
a little chunkier
Yes.
in the film, right?
I think that's
I'm looking at
probably
his
an
IMDb
old
picture, everyone.
headshot on IMDb, because everything that I've seen him in as of recent, he's about the same weight. I don't know if you guys have watched Insatiable on Netflix. It's a ridiculous show, but like in the best of ways, because they know exactly what it is and they just go full force into it. It's about a beauty pageant girl that is
Beauty pageant
a
queen.
cannibal, basically.
Oh,
And
hell
he
yeah.
plays her beauty pageant coach, and it's so good. It's so good. But I really appreciated him in this and his performance in
Yeah, he
this.
had a small role, but he was decent in it, I feel like.
Yeah, I think small roles actually, especially in such a large cast, they can make or break a movie, right? Because your main character is just going through so many scenes. So if you
Sure.
have bad people in those small roles, not to say bad people, but if you just have an actor who maybe isn't in it in the same, isn't at the same level as the rest of the cast or the actor that they're working with, it takes you out of it, or at
Yeah.
least it
I
does
thought
for me.
Bruce Willis was very Bruce Willis in this movie.
okay. Can we?
I
so,
was watching Bruce Willis die in the back of that car like he would die in any action movie ever, where he's just like chattering on.
Yeah.
And you're like, dude, you just got shot. Can I have some real emotion?
Yeah.
But I
So-
still loved him because it's Bruce Willis.
So I haven't seen Bruce Willis in a film since I don't know when, but I know he's been in like 7 films every year since like.
And there's been a lot of bad ones.
Oh, the last movie that I saw him in was the M. Night Shyamalan trilogy film.
Oh, Glass?
Glass.
Yeah.
Glass.
Oh, yeah,
That was
okay.
the last film that I saw him in. But since like I can't remember the last film before that. But with his recent diagnosis and how people have been talking about all these different stories that are coming out about the past few years of him on set and like not knowing his lines and like genuinely a lot of people were concerned or thought something was wrong and not so much that he was just like there for a paycheck and phoning it in.
Right.
I was expecting his acting to be like absolutely terrible, completely take you out of it and whatnot. And I was like thoroughly impressed that like, I was like, if he was also suffering from this disease that he potentially has right now, I'm like, damn, he's doing a good job.
Yeah, definitely. I always like Bruce Willis. Like I really
love Bruce Willis.
Yeah, I can tell by your speech there. But yeah, who doesn't like Bruce Willis?
I love Bruce Willis, but yeah, I'm looking up this movie that we watched not that long ago.
Oh, did you watch his
Trauma Center? It was called Trauma Center.
No, Brian.
It was called Trauma Center. No, but we literally only got like 20 minutes into it, and then we were like, nah, fuck this. This movie sucks. And I love Bruce Willis. He's been in some of my favorite action movies and some of my favorite movies of all time. But I feel like there are certain actors that almost just become, like they just play themselves after a while. Like I think Tom Cruise is one of those characters. Like Tom Cruise is Tom Cruise in every single movie he does nowadays.
Have you seen Tropic Thunder?
Thank you.
Have you seen Magnolia?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Have you seen
Vanilla Sky?
But those movies were also 15 years ago. Those movies were also at least 15 years ago, though.
Tropic Thunder was like 12 years ago.
Okay. My point still stands.
No.
It
was like 14 years ago.
No, I think it was like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Because I saw Tropic Thunder in the theater when I was 19. It was 15 years ago.
You saw Tropic Thunder when you were 15?
19.
19?
Yeah.
Wait, when did that come out?
15 years ago.
The point still stands that those movies were all a long time ago, and they basically play themselves. And I felt like Bruce Willis was fine, but he basically played himself.
Came out in 2008.
Again, like there was, so there you go, 14 years ago. So there was
so
nothing
not 15
different
years
about,
ago.
I hate you so much. I think that's the second time I've said that this episode.
Finish your sentence, Brian.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, there was nothing different about his performance in what was a fairly different type of movie than a lot of his action movies. So he was just kind of the same, which was fine, but I didn't think he was anything special.
Yeah.
Have you seen Rock of Ages? Just saying. I'm just saying. But yeah, that was probably like 20 years ago now, too. Rock of Ages. No, it wasn't 20 years ago. Rock of Ages was 2010. Did you see it?
I didn't.
Did you see it?
Brian's got a giant, long middle finger up to the screen.
Thank you. I do have a long, thin middle
It's very
finger.
long, yeah.
It's kind of alien-like.
A little alien figure. Should we go
Thanks
into
for
technical?
noticing.
Did you see Edge of Tomorrow?
Oh my God.
Oh my
I
God,
feel
I
like
hate
we've
you.
talked about the acting section now. Should we wander on into technical?
Last thoughts. I think we all agree that everyone was pretty much good.
Oh, wait, let's talk about Ed. Did we talk about good old Eddie boy?
I did.
Edward Norton.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will do the one thing that bothered me. He starts out the first scene with going from Tourette's to Brooklyn accent to Tourette's to Brooklyn accent. And at some point in that same scene, the Brooklyn accent no longer existed, and then it never happened again in the rest of the movie, which made me think that someone, maybe whoever his AD was, pulled him to the side and was like, I think we got to cut that out. I think you just have to be.
Yeah.
But it bothered me in the beginning quite a lot.
I did not care for him in his acting. I think he got the portrayal of the handicap really well, but
I think it's a really challenging thing to write and direct a movie when you're in like all of the scenes.
Yeah, he was in almost every single scene.
and produce, and he was also making sure that there was water
Craft
for
services, yeah.
He had to make sure the salad, the lettuce was fresh at Crafty.
Caffeination team.
Yep.
Yeah.
People need their Diet Coke
He had to
at
boom
3 p.m.
himself
on
at the
set.
same
He was
time.
janitor.
Is that a thing for you guys? I feel like every set I've ever been on at like 3, 4 o'clock, every single grip and gaff person needs a Diet Coke. Like there's gotta be Diet Coke on hand or someone's gonna flip some shit. No?
I haven't noticed that, but
No?
you've also probably been on a lot more sets than me.
I've been on like a bunch of indie film sets. Maybe it's the indie film sets where people are like, I'm not getting paid enough for this shit. I've been up since 4 a.m. Where's my Diet Coke? You're feeding me Subway? Fuck you. Yeah.
Hey, I love Subway. I had Subway 2 days ago.
Ew, gross. Brian, nobody eats Subway intentionally.
Yes,
you
that's
just
lots
eat
of
it if
people
you have to when you're on a set.
Lots of people like to eat fresh. I like to eat fresh.
It's so not fresh.
I had a lovely roast beef sandwich.
What was that article that came out several years ago
about the bread?
They use some chemical in it that's also in their bread that's also used to make mattresses.
Yeah, it tastes good. Whatever.
Okay.
Look it up.
Yeah, sure. I'm going to go to Breitbart.com.
Subway,
sure.
if you want to sponsor us.
Yo, I would love that, actually. Give me a card for free subs. Give me a meatball sub all day long. Mwah.
Yeah, actually, my best friend is obsessed with their tuna sandwiches. And Travis
but
is
it's not as
along.
good as the tuna sandwich from Jersey Mike's.
Oh, see, I like Jersey Mike's. I can fuck with some Jersey Mike's. Something about Subway.
The fuck's the difference?
I
What
think
the
I.
fuck's the difference?
No. There's a
the
difference.
bread. It's the bread. There's
I
some
love
weird
the bread
flavor
from
in Subway
Subway.
bread. I think it's mattress.
Yeah, the mattress provides that certain je ne sais quoi. All right, technical.
Yeah. So moving on to our last category is going to be technical. And that in this category, we'll be discussing all of the roles that Edward Norton played for this film that did not include acting or writing. So all his other roles that he did. Because I'm pretty sure he was the DP too, right? He hit record and then he ran in front of the camera. He had the steady cam attached to him as he was running.
The one quick editing note as the resident editor of the podcast. There were a couple, and I thought I had written down the specific scenes, but apparently I did not. But there were a couple of scenes where the camera would cut from one angle to the next angle, and when it was cutting like back and forth between two angles, the one angle, the audio levels would kind of spike a little bit. And there were like 2 or 3 times where I noticed that like those couple quick lines from that other angle were way louder than the entire rest of the scene.
Yeah.
And that bugged the hell out of me.
I'm glad that you brought that up because the mix of the film was so noticeable to me. Like,
Yes.
I don't know, and Jen, sorry, I know you're mixing this for us right now. Don't watch this movie because it will drive you crazy. But there are some scenes where like they're talking and I cannot hear what they're like. I legitimately could not hear what they're saying. The main scene that really stood out to me was when him and Laura are in bed after they slept together, not sexually, but
I couldn't hear anything they were saying.
I'm like, why is this so low? Why is this mix so low?
That's at the point where I had switched to my laptop, so I was like, is this just my computer thing? So
No, I was listening to it on my surround sound in my living room, and like
I blame Tubi.
I didn't watch it on Tubi. I rented it.
Oh, that's right. Never
No,
mind.
it's the film. I'm like,
Well,
whoever,
I blame Edward Norton for the bad mix job.
if he didn't have to boom himself, then maybe they would have got better audio.
Exactly. Yeah,
I just
but no, I mean,
pictured
If you think about it, you never see both his hands.
Were straight up in the air the whole movie.
You thought he was resting against the headboard, but actually he was holding the boom pole. You never see both his hands in the same frame.
That's true.
Wow.
Yeah.
And when you do,
See,
they
then
probably
we
put
just
on a
have to
C-stand.
give him mad props for all of this because
No,
that's pretty fucking amazing.
It's just but no, I felt the same way about it. That it was. I remember there being a bunch of times where I had to adjust the volume on my TV either up or down, which shouldn't be the case.
Should never be the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
That scene that we're talking about though, like I turned my sound bar and like sound system up to like 90, and I'm like barely able to make out what they were saying.
And then the next scene, it's like, what the I hate that.
So yeah, the mixing, and then if we're staying with editing, I mean, this also goes with cinematography, but the film language throughout this whole film was so, it just wasn't cohesive. It was all over the place. Like they randomly threw in the like video game POV cutscenes for some reason when he's like getting beat up. I'm like, why are we?
They kept
kept
giving us close-up shots of things that didn't even matter either. Like Willem Dafoe. Oh, well, no, the T actually make sense
So-
in that scene.
I'm glad you brought that up.
But there was okay.
Go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I just want to say, just going along with shots and what they were getting, I wrote down like 6 times continuity. There were so many scenes where they would do this insert shot, and it was different than the one that they had just done a moment before of the same exact thing. Like when Lionel walks into the house of Frank's wife and he says, I have all of Frank's things, and he sets down the things. He sets down his gun, his hat, also wallet, keys, and a couple other things. Literally, we do an insert of the things that he sets on the table. Then we go back up to him, and then we cut over to Frank's wife, and then it's another insert shot after she tells him, I don't want his things, of Lionel picking up his things, and like 8 of the things he set down are missing. It's then
Yes,
just
okay,
the
I'm
keys,
glad that was not
the
me
gun.
Yeah,
that
no.
And I
noticed
was
that.
like, so
And the
I
hat.
literally went back 3 times to be like, is
Whoa,
there
3
something
times.
I'm missing? Does he like sleight of hand something? Is this because it was so obvious that I was like, oh, this has to be purposeful because there's literally an insert shot of it.
Yeah.
So it's got to be purposeful. No,
Yeah.
I
it's
just looked it up, and actually under script supervisor it says Ed Norton. So he
Wait.
no.
You played that off so well. I was like, you gotta be fucking shitting me. This joke
Bringing
has
in my
run
old
on so
acting
long.
days.
I'm believing it. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Going off of the note of the insert shots / close-ups of stuff that don't matter. In that same scene, and maybe this was the scene that I paid the most attention to, but when they're in bed and like that, how like she gets up and goes and gets water or whatever, and then she starts talking about it, and at 1 hour and 38 minutes, that's the exact mark of the cut. It cuts away to the dresser top while she is talking about working for, while he is talking about working for Frank, and I feel like that is paying homage to. So there's this film, 1949 film called Late Spring, and it's by, gosh, I'm always gonna butcher the first name, Yasujiro Ozu. But like that film is like iconic because there's a scene where this mother and this daughter are talking, and it's this very heavy scene, and then he randomly cuts away to this vase that's like off in the corner somewhere, and film historians have like always like wondered like, why does he cut, blah blah blah, and like a lot of the times people think it's because that this conversation is so heavy and so like
Just has to
taxing,
get away.
yeah, that you need to look away, like you need to cut away. And I felt as though that's what he was doing with the dresser, like paying homage to this like great iconic film that is possibly one of the best films like, you know, made or whatever. But I just like, he does that several times, and I'm like, you keep doing that. But there was no, I went back and looked at the dresser, and I'm like, there's nothing on here.
Didn't it have a photo of her mom was on the dresser, I thought?
No, that's a different cutaway. He does that cutaway about 45 seconds after, which is also jarring because then it goes back to her and then it goes
Right.
back to the close-up.
So
But the close-up is
many-
like, the close-up is like literally, it's not even a full second. It's like maybe 20 frames, and then it goes back to her.
Right.
And I'm just like, I feel like the continuity was off, or Edward Norton's arm got tired, so the boom pole dropped in, so they had to like, they had to cut away to something.
Well, I looked up, like, I wasn't sure if this was his directorial debut or not
wasn't.
because, and it wasn't, but he's only done one other film.
Yeah, which
And that
is
was in
also great.
2000. I haven't seen that movie, but it's also a rom-com.
Yeah.
So very different
Mhm.
than this piece. And I think this is a very challenging, like, film noir style cinema is such a
Mhm.
specific thing, and to take it on as your second time ever directing something, and don't get me wrong, he's been on set after set after set after
Yeah.
set, but as an actor, and I think you can pick up a whole hell of a lot from just being on set. But
I also think it's the multiple hats, though. I think that's where,
right,
like,
because you're
It's
not
hard to
it's a
pay as
focusing
much
difficult, it's a
attention.
entirely.
difficult,
Yeah.
it's a difficult genre because it's so well known and so cliched and so parodied. Like
Right.
I parodied it in the intro, you know, like and
Right.
like that nature of the genre, and like if you don't, it has to be really good to nail that, or else people are gonna be like, this is
Yes.
a joke.
100%. I got lost in my head thinking about the best,
Yeah,
like
the
one of my
other
favorite films this last year, which was Guillermo del Toro's
Nightmare Alley.
Nightmare Alley. Yeah, which was like such a beautiful noir. And it was dark. This is the brightest lit film of this genre that I have ever seen.
That's true.
I kept being like, why are we in full light? Especially because it also took away from the fact that we're in 1957 in sort of the city streets.
And there's no LED lights back then.
Right.
Yeah.
We're in the hospital scene with Frank in the beginning, and it's like these bright hospital lights, and like everyone looks so clean and crisp, which did not feel like the
It
tone
felt like a
of
stage
the
play.
movie.
It felt like people were acting in a stage play.
Yes, so very much.
I also thought that because there's this other moment where I feel like they're playing homage to Orson Welles. It's the film noir film where he walks out of the shadows. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Any other film lovers out there that I'm blanking on this?
So you sound smart.
Orson Welles walks out of shadow. Touch of Evil. I didn't have to look it up, but Touch of Evil.
It's on his computer. Right?
I did not hit search. Look, no, you look at that. I did not hit search.
I know, you damn nerd. I wouldn't have cared if you did.
Anyway, as I was saying, there's this iconic shot of Orson Welles emerging from the shadows, and it's very similar to what they do with Edward Norton's character when Laura is leaving, and no, not Laura. It's the woman with the big tits. That he says it. He's like, big tits. And then she throws away the perfectly like unshredded paperwork in the trash can.
Right.
I wonder if her IMDb credit is big tits.
Actually, I'm gonna look this up.
But that you'll look up, yeah.
But going off of your point, they cut to him across the street, and he's like in the shadows, and then he like emerges and comes forward. But even when he's in the shadows, you still see
He's
him.
so well lit.
Yeah, and I'm like,
yeah.
This should be. Even if you don't light it properly, the coloring, you should have like increased the contrast or something to make it look more like he's coming out of the shadows. Especially if, I'm sure I'm not the only one that would have watched that and been like, oh, that's very similar to Touch of Evil. Brian, you were going to say something?
I don't think so. I don't think I was. I think I just said, yep. Mm-hmm.
There was also another continuity moment that bothered me. It was when Ed Norton parks his car in front of the club the first night that he decides to go in with Laura. So Lionel decides to go in with Laura. One, he gets to park directly in front of the club.
What a lucky bastard.
Two, he didn't turn off his car lights. The car is like clearly still on, but they like exit and go inside the club, which drove me nuts.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we mentioned this several times, but him not having any scrapes on him. Or when Laura's father, we still think
Billy,
the man that is her father at the club owner.
Yeah. Like
when he passes away, she runs over to him, in her robe, and she gives him this giant hug, and he's covered in blood. And then we see her walking into her apartment a moment later, and there's no blood anywhere on her. She looks...
Well, he was mostly covered by a sheet, though. She just kind of pulled it off of his face. So that could be...
She pulls it off of his face and upper chest and then lays directly on top of him.
Oh, I thought she just pulled
you're
it,
right.
Down to his shoulders,
I let it go.
Yeah.
But there were things like that it would just be so easy to just add a little thing here, a little thing there that would just make it feel more believable.
Yeah. I will say the overall set design and decoration I found to be realistic to what I at least think the late 1950s looked like, with the clothes.
Stop it, Brian. You were a child then. You remember.
Actually, I was already 30 years old by then. So I do remember.
Didn't get to high school until the 90s. That's crazy.
Yeah, I didn't really like school. But like the clothes, I already talked about the cars, even just the way the buildings on the street look, that all felt realistic to me. That part I enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. I thought it felt realistic, other than the fact that it was the cleanest New York City in 1950s that I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yes.
And everyone had a tailor and
yes,
personal.
Yes. Stylist.
Trav, You mean you didn't have that when you lived in Harlem?
Yeah.
Agreed. That's what I mean. No one was dirty whatsoever.
You didn't have a tailor?
I did not.
Like, I kind of wanted they describe these PIs. They're clearly not the guys that are making money, which is why they do all this, like, you know, under the radar sort of stuff. You would imagine them to be a little bit grimy, a little bit dirty, a little bit like give us that sort of a thing. But that wasn't the choice.
I also love, sorry, we're kind of just jumping around now, and this kind of has become like nitpicks to some extent. But when the guy that I said I didn't really know, Lou, I guess was his name, he like he like stomps Edward Norton's face.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, he's dead.
Right.
Like they just caved in his
Killed
skull.
our main character.
Because the front of your face is the most vulnerable part of your skull, and like the thinnest. Like he just shoved
He's
in.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's done.
For.
And then it cuts to just like a black eye.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you guys feel about the score? Because we haven't talked about that.
I actually thought it was good. I thought it was restrained enough for me. And there were some moments that I thought like, oh, this is really, it's just the piano. And that's like all this scene needs right now. It doesn't need anything else. It doesn't need strings or anything like that. I felt like when I did notice the score, it was effective and restrained. I didn't think it was anything amazing. It was very much of the genre.
Yes. I thought there were a couple moments where it was a little heavy-handed, actually.
Oh, okay.
And that it was overcompensating for what the scene needed to be, maybe emotionally or script-wise. I especially thought in the beginning chase scene, and then when they have Frank in the car after Frank's been shot and he has his speech and he's saying things and the music is just like all over the place. And I was like, this is a moment where I got why they were doing it. They wanted to pace it up. This is the inciting incident. This is he going to live or die? But it honestly took away from the relationship between Frank and Lionel for me, because I just felt like it was quite heavy. But since we're speaking about that moment, and then Brian, you can talk about the score as well. I just wanted to say I really did love that shot where during the car chase scene where the car that's tailing them, the car that Lionel is in, they turn the corner down this long alleyway and he's looking every which way. And I love that Frank gets shot right as they pass the alleyway. I just thought that was a really cool moment.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah.
My turn. Okay. I wrote down a couple notes about the score. The first thing that I wrote down, there's that first scene where Edward Norton, where Lionel gets back to his apartment at night. And he had talked earlier about how weed can kind of help control his symptoms or whatever. And the first night where he gets home and he's hitting the pipe, where he's smoking weed and getting high, there was some song. It was not just like a...
Did we think that was weed? I thought it was something harder than weed. I thought he was like smoking.
Oh, no, he said weed at one point.
Yeah, he said weed.
Did he?
He said weed, but then he
Yeah.
said weed, and he said occasionally he would smoke something harder, which is why when Michael Kenneth Williams' character offers him something, which maybe was crack, because he's like, this ain't just weed,
crack
man.
wasn't around back then,
But
maybe it
something.
was in the 90s when this book took place.
Yeah. And Edward Norton at that point is like, just give it to me. And he had mentioned in a voiceover earlier on that he smokes weed and on the occasional something harder.
Sorry, Brian, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's fine. Whatever the song was that was playing during that scene, and there were vocals. It was not just a score. I thought was fucking terrible. I don't exactly remember how it went, and even if I did, I wouldn't try to sing it because your ears and our listeners' ears would start bleeding, and I don't want that. But I hated that song. What I wrote about the general score, so I said because it was very, like you said, like the music was like very kind of 50s noir style music. At times I felt like it was a little bit obnoxious when there was some of the horns that were, and I think this is kind of what you alluded to, Kai, where the horns, some of the just kind of went a little all over the place. And sometimes the horns were like the high-pitched shrieking type of horns that just kind of hurt my ears.
Yeah.
So the times that I noticed the score were more when I noticed those horns sections. And I think part of it was also probably a little bit of the mix too. because there were some times where I thought it was just too loud. I thought it was overpoweringly loud. And then the last note I just wrote, yeah, not a fan of this music. So I think I was just talking about the overall.
Yeah, I actually I didn't mind the jazz. I do get maybe the mix of it being the like too squeaking of the horns and stuff, but I actually did appreciate the jazz music because it was I grew up listening to jazz, or in a house where we listened to a lot of jazz, and my father was an eccentric man, I shall say, and would often turn on something that was just like you couldn't tell what was going on. And it was like, how does he listen to this? His brain is all over the place. And I really appreciated that conversation that Ed Norton and Michael Kenneth Williams have about the jazz. And then that plays when he's in his more, I don't know if manic is the right word, but more states of like feeling.
Yeah, that could be.
Sort of or like his brain is going all out of sorts.
For me, I think it was just ultimately like the overall tone of the horns and the mix that just felt ended up.
I get
it ended up after a while feeling a little shrill.
Right, abrasive.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that just about wraps it up for technical.
Cool.
Have we changed our mind at all?
Fuck no.
No.
I think I changed my mind. I think I'm going to go with
shit.
this is a good, bad movie. I think I would rewatch it and invent some sort of drinking game. Like every time he says tits. Like take a shot or something. Something along those lines.
So you're wanting to play a drinking game around it changed your
I just
bad,
think also like
choice? Your verdict?
You both have said so many things that I'm like, wait, that happened in this movie? That I'm like, maybe I should.
Travis is really just the podcast alcoholic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think this is a good bad movie.
Yeah. Part of it for me is I wanted to really like this movie, in large part because I think it's a phenomenal cast. There are a lot of actors that I really, really like in this movie. And I think I was kind of let down ultimately by the story, by the whole deal. So that's why I'm sticking with bad, good movie.
Was it just me or did it feel like Alec Baldwin was doing his Trump SNL?
Or a little bit of his, I can't remember his name on 30 Rock, but his boss character on 30 Rock.
I got a lot of his mannerisms, like his hands and all that was like very like his Trump SNL.
Yeah.
I mean, but he didn't have the voice, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he is essentially playing a politician.
He obviously didn't do like a Trump voice, but like his mannerisms felt very much the same. I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't talk about Alec Baldwin at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because he was Alec Baldwin. Like,
yeah, I liked him.
He was what he was.
I mean, I liked him.
No. I like him too. I think everyone is perfectly adequate and perfect foundation for a drinking game.
Except for Leslie Mann.
I will say, even though I said that this is a bad, good movie, I would watch it again if it was on. Like, I wouldn't purposely sit down to watch it again, but if somebody else was like, oh, I haven't seen this movie and I want to check it out, I didn't hate it. I thought there were ways in which it fell short. But
I would only watch this with alcohol.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah, I wouldn't rewatch this, but I didn't hate the movie. I didn't mind it. We've watched other movies that I've hated way more than this.
I'm really surprised that you're saying that, Brian. I thought you were going to just tear this movie apart.
With that, I didn't hate it?
Mainly because it was 2.5 hours, and you're like, anything over 15 minutes is like...
hard for him.
It ended up being more than 2.5 hours because of the fucking commercials on Tubi.
Tubi, yeah. I know. This was like,
How long
I decided,
were those commercials?
I don't know. It took me 3.5 hours to watch this movie yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
But also because I would like...
Well, that wasn't because of the commercial.
It took me 3 days to
finish
this movie.
Yeah.
I rented it, and it was a 48-hour rental, and I couldn't finish it in the 48 hours.
Wow.
So I actually had to rent
Rented
it again.
it twice?
But the second time, I only rented it in standard definition, not in 4K.
Well, that's good, because if they didn't actually pay any of the actors, then maybe the actors had back end points. So
probably.
you're actually helping them finally get a paycheck off of this movie.
Yeah,
because we all know
they're
Alec
all
Baldwin's probably
struggling
really
so
Yeah,
hard.
he's
Good old
struggling.
Edward Norton,
Yeah.
he really needs
Struggling.
that extra money.
Well, that pretty much sums up or concludes our episode of this epic episode. What did we watch?
Motherless Brooklyn.
Motherless Brooklyn. Oh man, I am
We
on
have to
top of it.
stop recording these in the summertime in the fucking heat of this
Yeah,
apartment. It's
I
so
feel
hot. Sweating
great.
in here, Brian,
I feel great.
and losing our minds.
I feel great.
Good for you.
Anyway, if you want to reach out to us or talk to us about either Motherless Brooklyn or any of the other films that we talked about in this episode or on the other episodes of our podcast, you can find us on all social media platforms at goodbad_badgood. You can find me on all social media platforms at travis.orozco. You could find Kai at
Kai Lane Mai on Instagram.
and Mr. Brian at
Thank you for calling me Mr. By the way, I appreciate that. Next time, call me Sir. I am Bossip on Instagram, not Bossip Official, and I am Brian Ossip on Twitter. But please don't at me.
You could at me for anything, I guess. I don't care.
Yeah, at Travis for any complaints.
Yeah. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
And I don't check anything regularly, so I might not catch it if you do.
So definitely at Kai then, because it won't. It'll just fall on deaf ears.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Just tweet at Kai as much as you possibly can.
Yes.
She will be sure to get back to you.
I haven't checked it since like 2012.
Until the next episode when we watch a crime-fighting chicken. Bye.
Ta-ta.
Bye.
Good Bad Bad Good is an Ex Nihilo production. Original theme music and sound engineering done by Jen Star Hacker. Find her at hackersoundmusic.com. Opinions expressed are solely that of the speaker and do not necessarily reflect the views of any entity they represent.